Now, the terrible cold, it's probably got his transmission and bevel 80-90 high point, is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Get a thin oil, an automatic transmission lubricant with lubricant in it. LG5 is probably a good one to have.
Okay.
And that's very oily, but it'll stay thinner. Otherwise it'll get so cold that you won't be able to shift.
Aye.
I had that problem with the Harley Davidson, and couldn't shift. Now I went up the Arctic with my BMW, and in terrible cold weather, minus 41 or 43 or something, and I was able to shift. I don't remember that being a particular difficulty, but on the Harley Davidson, the cold wrecked the transmission.
Wow.
The 80-90 high pod became such a gel that we assumed that the gears cut slots in it and didn't get lubricated.
Ouch.
And then finally they're totaled. But Harley Davidson sent another transmission and it was put on in Toronto.
Huh.
That was a test we were doing with Harley Davidson's belt. That was 1984. That was the first year of the belt bikes.
And where did you take that bike to test it?
I went to Halifax.
Uh-huh.
Across doing all the bike shows.
Okay.
And there was some trouble. I had one very peculiar thing. I learned to get the Harley started by pouring hot water on it. I was staying in motels, and so the first thing I did...
So this was in the winter in Halifax?
Yeah,
you drove it in the winter to Halifax?
It had to be winter. The Harley Davidson people had never tested it in winter time. It was just California. They make bikes in California. So, all right. So we put thin oil in the motor. I didn't do anything about transmission and bevel, transmission and no shaft, because this is belt drive transmission, right? And I set off. I got the belt somewhat covered with plastic sheathing, and we were worried about the belt. We didn't know how it would work out when we put 60, 70 horsepower into it and minus 40, having stood there all night. So I would go out with buckets of hot water and pour it all over the motor to make it warm enough to start it.
Whoa.
Got the motor started and off I went. But couldn't shift. Everything was too stiff. Well, I did, of course, eventually shift. 10 kilometers down the road I managed to get second and so on and so forth. Well, at Portage la Prairie, again very cold, I thought it'd be a good idea if I poured water over the transmission as well.
Now, this is like in January?
Yes.
Oh my.
In order to warm it up. And transmission and Harleys in that period were separated from the motor.
Uh-huh.
So the motor didn't warm the transmission much. And I poured it all over the transmission and put it in the gear, and away I went. Shifted. Then I couldn't use the clutch because the clutch froze solid. Because Harley Davidson's clutch cable goes out of the transmission in a dip and then goes up to the handlebar. And water got into that dip and froze there. And I had to do a lot without the clutch. A long way. It was a long time before I managed to get that water out of it. This is easy to fix. The top of this motor is simple. The transmission isn't. You need tools for the transmission, like you need tools for the bevel. The bevel's another tricky thing. I mean, it's particularly on this one because it's got sidecar drive too, I suppose. It's got more clutter in it.
Yeah.
Make sure that oil is coming out spotlessly clean on each change.
On
several changes before you go.
On what was that?
On the bevel.
On the bevel. And on the gearbox.
The shaft is exposed, so you don't have that problem. Any grease you use has got to be thin or just oil. Keep these lubricated with oil, thin oil. Oh, throttles, they're inclined to stick. So have thin oil in there, it's working beautifully.